Oh, yes. Hello. Great. Yes, this is being live streamed. Got it. No problems at all. Hey, everybody. Sorry, as you can tell, the voice is not totally back to where it was back at the beginning of February. But I'm on it and I'm working on it. And I want to say welcome to this month's edition. Can you believe it's March already? Can you believe it's 7 o'clock and it's still light outside already? Oh my God, this year is going so quickly. My name is Dawn Sev. This is the Rock and Roll Book Club for today, March 14th, 2023. Today we're going to be talking about SHE BOP by Lucy O'Brien. And I'm just going to get into this because I have the feeling this is going to be one of the ones that gets a little on the ranty side. One of the things I've learned being old and also having lived in Europe is that history is always really interesting depending on who you don't see talked about in the history. Traditionally, that's always been a way of control. It's a way of controlling the narrative. It's a way of controlling to see who gets seen and who's considered important. But it's also a really interesting point when you're starting to look at different things in history as well and say, well, why don't we know about this? How come we don't know about that? Part of that is just because in the last 50 to 70 years, we're getting better about exploring things and studying new things that people hadn't considered before. But it also kind of makes it interesting to say, okay, well, why haven't these people or why hasn't this particular topic been studied? And that's one of the things that Lucy O'Brien's SHE BOP does really well. Lucy O'Brien is a journalist who's been working in the UK for a very, very long time. I don't remember exactly when she started, but I believe it was back in the beginning of the 90s. This is actually the second edition of a book that was published originally in 1995, excuse me. And it talks a lot about all sorts of women who have been involved in all sorts of parts of music in a lot of different ways. We could be talking about Ella Fitzgerald. We could be talking about different people who grew up in the Delta South. This is, as you can't tell by how thick the darn thing is, this is an extremely comprehensive look at how women have been involved, have stayed involved, and have been managed to make lives and names for themselves in spite of a lot of different things. It's not all about the men. It could be about the social situation. It could be about perceptions. It could have been about their own families. And you can't do better than this for a non-academic text. You can't do better than this for a book that talks about women in the history of Western popular music. It is not written necessarily in a chronological order. It's organized by 14 different themes, starting off with women in the earlier days of music, focusing on women in New York City, for example, women in the Big Bang era. But the thing I like about it is that it groups it by topic. So if there's something specific that you want to know about, say women in country music, there's a section on that. You want to know about women during the Big Band era, there's a section on that, which makes it really good for dipping into. So if you're the kind of reader who likes to have a couple of different books on the go, say, for example, you're reading something like the Kim Gordon book, and then you want something that tells you a little bit about Seattle grunge, this is a really good book to have at your side as you're reading other books, because it is so comprehensive and it shows that interconnectedness that exists in a lot of music and a lot of areas of music, but just in the lives of how people had to collaborate and had to work together to be able to stay alive and make careers with each other. That said, if you do go beginning to end, as I did, it's not a slog. I'm not going to call it a slog because that's not fair. What I will say, though, is that it is one of those books that is better if you take it in little bites. So don't try to blow through the whole thing in one shot. You won't get the subtlety, and you won't get the names. You won't get the tones and the various aspects of the history quite as well as if you just go at it in little bits. And that's one of the reasons why I do actually wish that when I had started this whole rock and roll book club thing at the beginning of 2022, I really wish this had been one of the first books I'd actually read, because it's kind of like the foundation upon which a lot of other books could have been built that would have provided more context, more nuance. But that said, it's nice to be able to read a book like this and then think, oh, I want to go back and read the Viv Albertine book. I want to go back and read the book about Britpop. I want to go back and read the book about fangirls, because they weave together so beautifully with the information that's here in SHE BOP. I like this one quote from Gina Birch, Late of the Raincoats, who's just put out her first solo album. It will make you want to form a band. It will make you angry. It will make you laugh, and it will educate you. And I will say it is very educational in the sense of it provides you with all that information that you've ever wanted to know about women in music. But Gina Birch isn't wrong. It doesn't play down the wrongdoings, how women got screwed over, by society, by men, by husbands, by promoters, just by people who didn't want to take a risk on it, because music was always seen as being something that only loose women did. If you remember what loose women meant back in the day, or things that only, women who weren't under control by some sort of man, or, not nice women, basically, which is crazy because when you think about it, the whole idea of musicianship being white and male and privileged and skinny and young, that's just such a social construct. Like nobody ever puts down in rules that that's exactly what it has to be. It's just kind of the way it worked out, to the detriment of a lot of different groups, not just women, but to a lot of different groups. But Lucy O'Brien doesn't shy away from how tough a lot of women musicians, especially in the 30s and 40s, had it. She's very, very specific about the issues that they faced in terms of poverty, in terms of drugs, in terms of social mobility, in terms of just being able to be conceived of as equal partners, especially when they were as good as or better than some of the men with whom they performed. And that, just as a side note, Lucy O'Brien has also just released the definitive biography of Karen Carpenter. I don't know if it's for sale in North America yet, but I do know that it was released, I think, last Friday in the UK, and it's making quite some waves over there. So that might be another good book to look at in the future for Rock and Roll Book Club. So we're getting pretty close to 7 minutes. I've still got a couple minutes yet. So I'm not going to shy away from that. It is, it's not necessarily neutral and, give everybody equal time in its tone, the same way that you might find in an academic test, which has to be more measured, which has to be more even-handed with its treatment of a lot of different aspects. But what it does have is it does have that academic rigor, where it doesn't look at the history of women in music from one specific angle. It brings in a whole lot of other things like sociology and the history of the United States, and what was it like being a woman. So you've got a little bit of everything in the mix, which makes it nice, because then it doesn't just end up being like a fact sheet of, oh, well, this person did this, and then she married so and so, and he was a band leader, and he made her. It's none of that sort of stuff, because otherwise it wouldn't be as engaging and as long-lived a book. Because you figure if this book's been around for nearly 30 years, that's got to be a pretty good sign of its quality. So I would definitely give Lucy O'Brien's SHE BOP a 5 highlighters out of 5. Again, not a book, as you can probably tell from its thickness. It's before the endnotes. I think it's like 400 pages. I'm sorry, I should have made note of that. 402 pages before you get to the end notes. So this is one that if you want a beach book with a bit more bite and a little more interest and a little more depth than what you would get, I would definitely recommend SHE BOP by Lucy O'Brien, published by Jawbone in the United. I don't know if you can see that. Probably not because of the glare. Published by Jawbone Publishers in the United Kingdom. Again, if you can't find it in a local bookstore, which is probably the case in some place in like Ottawa, definitely check out Ontario Interlibrary Loan if you are in Ontario. If any library in the province has it, they can get it to you. Whether it's in a university holding or it's in a major library in downtown Toronto, no problem. Talk to your local librarian. Interlibrary Loan will get you fixed up and get you that book. So looking ahead for Rock and Roll Book Club, obviously after that one, I needed something that was a little bit lighter and a little easier to fit in my purse. So we're going to go with David Hepworth's A Fabulous Creation, How the LP Saved Our Lives. And I'm just going to read the blurb from the back. The era of the LP began in 1967 with Sgt. Pepper. The Beatles didn't just collect a bunch of songs, they made an album. 15 years later, the Walkman had already taken the music out of the home and into the streets. The record business had begun trying to reverse engineer the creative process in order to make big money. No comment. And nobody would ever play music or listen to it in quite the same way again. But at the same time, you look at how popular vinyl has gotten in the last 3 to 5 years, and it's still kind of nice to see that this sort of physical medium has come back. So this is the book about A fabulous creation, How the LP Saved Our Lives. I will spare you the goofy picture of Bob Dylan that's on the cover, because Bob Dylan does not look really great in that photo, even though he's playing a record here. So that's going to be April 10th. That one's actually going to be recorded because I will not be at home. I'll be in Hamilton that week. And I didn't know this, but in the UK, there is and I'm sorry, I should have researched this as well, because I actually did bookmark it. There is actually a prize for the best rock and roll book of the year, or best popular music book of the year. And one of the strongest contenders, Nige Tassel's Whatever Happened to the C86 Kids. This is basically a story about the New Musical Express back in the day. You know, when people start listening, we're listening to cassettes before, not like they're listening to cassettes now, because that's going to be the next thing you want to do, is to dig out your cassette player. Publications in Europe and the UK used to give out these free compilations of, you know, up and coming artists or national, you know, national heroes or whatever. I remember in Spain, it was always about national music. And the C86 was the one that was given out with the NME. So this is the story about all those bands, that whatever happened to those bands who ended up on those cassettes, and where are they now, kind of thing. And this is up, and if it's up for if it does win the prize, I'll put it in the comments so that you can read the whole thing. That one's going to be May 9th. And I don't know what's coming up for June yet, because I have not, with this cold, I haven't been out book shopping, as you can probably tell. I've just been out like postering and trying to sleep. So that's it for Rock and Roll Book Club for this week, again, or for this month, again, April 10th, a fabulous creation by David Hethworth. Read on, rock on, stay safe, and hope to see you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.